Good morning. My name is Mary Rafferty. I am the Executive Director of the Virginia Conservation Network, and I am thrilled to be inviting you or welcoming you all to join us for the 2023 Virginia General Assembly preview. Thank you so much for being here. As many of you already know, VCN is the partnership of 160 conservation organizations in Virginia. And we have been working for over 50 years to help local, regional, statewide environmental nonprofits here in Virginia coordinate with one another, craft policy, and work together to tackle some of the biggest environmental problems that we face. And we do that through our broad common agenda briefing book and campaigns. I'm excited to welcome you to the General Assembly preview. This is an annual event that gives you, our network partners and their members, an inside view into what to expect for the General Assembly that is really right around the corner, about to start in about a month in January. This year, we are zooming in speakers from across the Commonwealth. These are the key experts on the top issues that we anticipate being discussed during the General Assembly on the environment. And we have a record number of over 400 people who have registered to join us to zoom in and to learn about what's happening with us. At the same time, we also have a record number of watch party locations. There are 13 watch parties happening across the Commonwealth this morning, where you are joining us at your favorite local environmental nonprofit office or library to have a little bit of breakfast and watch us on screen. And afterwards, for those of you who are joining us at the in-person watch parties, you'll get an opportunity to talk about the issues that perhaps you hear about today, this morning on this broader webinar, but also about the issues that you care about most that are impacting you and your local community, and how you might be able to make a difference on those at the state level, as well as talking a little bit more about how you can talk to local policymakers and your state legislators ahead of the January session. Before we get started, I do want to just say a thank you and a welcome to all of our watch party hosts. It is our most ever, so give me a second while I run through these. I just want to say a hello to Arlington and the Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions and Sierra Club Potomac River Group. Thanks for hosting. In Charlottesville, thanks to the Piedmont Environmental Council and Appalachian Voices. In Fredericksburg, hello to the Friends of the Rappahannock. Thank you for joining us. In Hampton, thank you to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. In Harrisonburg, hi, Alliance for the Shenandoah Valley and the Shenandoah Valley Bicycling Coalition. Thanks for hosting. In Lexington, hello to Rockbridge Conservation. Thank you. In Leesburg, the Loudoun Climate Project, thank you so much for hosting. In Reston, Sierra Club Great Falls Group and the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia, thank you so much for hosting and welcome. In Richmond, the Virginia League of Conservation Voters, hello, thanks for hosting. Roanoke, the Blue Ridge Land Conservancy, hi, thanks for having us zoomed all the way out in Roanoke. In Virginia Beach, Lynnhaven River Now, thank you all so much for hosting. In Warrenton, Piedmont Environmental Council, hello. And finally, in Woodbridge, the Prince William Conservation Alliance and National Parks Conservation Association, thank you for hosting. We're so excited to be with you today. So let's go ahead and get started. One quick programming note. We will have a handful of panels. Most panels will have 3 advocates. And after the advocates speak, after all 3 speak, we'll open up for question and answer. The way that you can ask questions is by texting. So if Brittany, you can go to the next screen. You can see that this is the number that you can use to ask questions, 804-255-9283. Text questions to this number, and that will be the way that I can see them, and then that will be how we ask the hosts. You can ask the panelists. You can text throughout their entire presentation, and I'll just have them going so that I can ask the questions. It's both if you're zooming in and if you are at an in-person watch party. This is how you ask the questions. Now, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. We are going to start with Chris Layen, who is with the Virginia League of Conservation Voters. And Chris is actually going to start off with a quick political lay of the land. As we know, in November, the elections changed who is going to be representing us in the General Assembly. And while most of our issues remain bipartisan, and certainly Virginia Conservation Network, as well as many of our partners, are nonpartisan C3 organizations, it is important that we know who represents us, who's in charge, so that it can help give us the sense of what we can expect. So with that, Chris, go ahead and kick us off.
Thank you, Mary. Go ahead and just share screen here. Let me know, are we're live? Beautiful. All right, so what I'm going to cover is, first off, in 60 seconds, why are we having such a big transition? Then we'll take a quick look at House and Senate leadership, the announced committee structure so far, as well as a quick note at the end on contacting members. It's a big transition for the General Assembly. And as they like to say, there will be a big power struggle between the governor and the House of Delegates, because we will, and the Senate, we're going to have for the first time a Republican governor and a Democratic-led House and Senate for the first time this millennium. This big transition has been caused by 10-year redistricting and retirements. So we've had some folks who've been serving as long as 40 years in the legislature who are retiring, combined with nonpartisan redistricting that did not take into account where existing members' houses were, which was really a big push for a lot of new folks to get into office. So the effect was divided government. We saw 34 new House members, as well as the 4th new speaker in 8 years. We saw a very large number of new Senate members. I believe it's 16, and the first, or 17, and the first Senate Democratic leader not named Saslaw since 1996 was announced. Big news in the Senate also, only 6 of 15 Senate Finance and Appropriation Committee members are returning. These 6 folks are going to be the only members of that committee who are familiar with the budget process, and we're going to see our first Republican budget being proposed in a decade. In the House, following a very narrow election of Michael Fagans in Virginia Beach, saw the House Democrats take a 51-49 majority, with Democratic leadership Speaker designee Don Scott of Portsmouth, Majority Leader Charnel Herring of Alexandria, and Caucus Chair Kathy Tran of Fairfax. This was a big deal because not only is Don Scott going to be the first Black Speaker of the House of Delegates, he is also going to be presiding from his speaker's dais and be able to look across and see the Lieutenant Governor's podium in the Virginia Senate, where Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears is presiding. First time ever that 2 Black lawmakers or elected leaders have held 2 of the most powerful positions in Virginia history. And it comes to Republican leadership, the former Speaker Todd Gilbert of Shenandoah just narrowly beat out the Southwest Virginia former Majority Leader Terry Kilgore for minority leadership. Amanda Batten's going to retain her caucus chair position, and Michael Wibbert will stay on as whip of the House Republicans. The House committees are decided by the Speaker's office, and the Speaker designee has decided to roll out his announcement, or to put out his announcements on a rolling basis. The committees that we have so far are appropriations, with Luke Torian, the former appropriations chair out of Prince William County, continuing in that role. The Jawan Ward will take over the Labor and Commerce Committee. Mark Sickles of Fairfax will lead Health and Human Services. Patrick Hope will head Courts of Justice. And Vivian Watts will resume the role that she had during the 2020 to 2021 legislative session as finance chair. On the Democratic-led Senate side, we saw really, with the election of Russet Perry out in Loudoun County, saw the narrow minority of the Senate maintained, going down from 22-18, which they had with the 2023 legislative session after the special election of Aaron Rouse. There was the majority leader is Scott Sorvell out of Fairfax County. Democratic caucus chair is going to be Mamie Locke out of Hampton. Vice Chair Adam Eben, and Louise Lucas will remain as the President Pro Tem of the Senate, as well as taking on a key committee role. Republican leadership, Minority Leader Ryan McDougall out of Hanover will be joined by Caucus Chair Mark Obenchain, and out of Rockingham, so a little bit more Shenandoah power there. And the whips, Bill Stanley of Franklin County and Bryce Reeves out of Spotsylvania County. Ryan McDougall's taking over for Tommy Norman, the gentleman in the pink tie in that picture, one of the other very long-serving members of the Virginia Senate who has retired along with Sazla. The Senate Democratic Caucus announced their standing committee chairs recently following the Senate Finance Committee retreat. We saw Senator Dave Marsden will take over as Ag Committee Chair. Senator Cree Deeds out of Albemarle County, Commerce and Labor. Senator Ghazala Hashmi outside of Richmond will take over Education and Health. Finance and Appropriations will be led by Senator Louise Lucas of Portsmouth. This is, want to highlight this committee here. She is not expected to have a co-chair. So if you need finance requests in the Senate, it is going to go through Senator Lucas. General Laws and Technology, Senator Adam Eben. Judiciary, Senator Scott Suravel. So the minority leader will also, the majority leader will also be the judiciary chair. Local government led by Senator McPike. Aaron Rouse will head privileges and elections. Senator Barbara Favola will stay on as the rehab chair. Senator Mamie Locke will continue on as chair of rules, and Senator Boysko will take over as chair of transportation. That's all I've got for y'all today. That's just a quick look at the lay of the land as we head into the General Assembly session. These are going to be the key voices and key folks to reach out to on the issues that you were just about to hear from some of my other panelists. Thank you, Mary. Back to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. And I think if we take anything away from Chris's panel, it's that there is a lot of new leadership, lots of new voices. So education, education, education. That is what is key over the next few months as we head into this new General Assembly session. So with that, we're going to kick off with our climate and clean energy panel. This is our first panel. You'll see that at the bottom there is the area to text for questions. So please don't hesitate to do that. This is your first panel to ask questions. We will have 3 speakers, and our first is Nate Benferato from the Southern Environmental Law Center to talk to us a little bit about what to expect with the Clean Economy Act and the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative this session. Nate.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Nate Benferato, Southern Environmental Law Center. I'm going to talk about some really important clean energy policies. Want to just acknowledge some of the other folks that worked on the briefing book here, Vic Higgins at CCAN, Blair St. Ledger Olson at Climate Cabinet, Jay Ford at Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and Mandy Warner at EDF. 2020 was really a transformational year in terms of energy policy in Virginia. 2 big laws that many of us here helped push and advance became law. And so we have the Virginia Clean Economy Act, and we also have the law that brought us into the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. So let's start with RGGI, as it is known. RGGI is a very successful program. It's been around for almost 2 decades now to reduce carbon pollution from power plants. It's a market-based program. It doesn't ban fossil fuels, but it says, hey, if you produce carbon dioxide, if you burn fossil fuels, you now have to pay for it. You have to buy an allowance. It's been really successful. We have been participating since 2021, and it's been going great. Our emissions are down more than 16.8%. It's bringing in really important revenue to fantastic programs, energy efficiency programs for low-income households, flood resilience money to get expertise, to hire staff, to execute projects. And that money is going all across the Commonwealth, helping thousands and thousands of Virginians. Now, separately, away from the General Assembly, the current administration is trying to repeal this program. And in fact, they have repealed it, but it's now in litigation. And so that litigation is going to be going on. But what we need to focus on here for the General Assembly is to make sure that our lawmakers don't forget they have their job to do, right? We need to protect that 2020 law, which in our view requires participation in RGGI. So it's critical. There's been many attempts to repeal that law. We need to keep that law on the books. And the other thing we need to do is make sure the money that's coming from the RGGI auctions are still flowing to these really important programs. So, you know, the last few years, defense has been incredibly important. It's going to continue to be important, especially for RGGI this year. And I know a lot of folks are going to make sure nothing bad happens to RGGI. Next, I want to talk about the Clean Economy Act. So this was another one of those transformational laws, and RGGI and the Clean Economy Act really work hand in hand together. They are, you know, RGGI is really focused on the emission side and making sure we have tools to reduce emissions and make sure they are going down steadily over time. The VCEA is really about getting a commitment to zero carbon energy and a pathway to doing that. Things like maximizing energy efficiency, mandating retirements of fossil fuel power plants, increasing our distributed generation, rooftop solar, getting a renewable energy pathway out there, making sure the market is going to help support this transition. Like RGGI, there have been many attempts to repeal it. And you know, we in the community had really tried to just hold the line on these repeals and just say, don't touch the Clean Economy Act. What we learned last year is I think lawmakers aren't really interested in just saying, you know, hands off the Clean Economy Act. And so this year we are, you know, the Clean Economy Act is working fantastic, but we want to acknowledge that there are a few ways where we could make some improvements. We have 3 years under our belt with this law now, and, you know, let's go out and improve some things that are good for consumers, good for the environment. And so that's what we're going to be working on here. It's sort of a part of the best defense here is really a good offense. So let's acknowledge that the program as a whole is working fantastic, but we can make a few improvements, you know, expanding distributed generation, expanding third-party developers and their ability to get projects done and not just utility-owned projects. So it's a really exciting time, and I know a lot of folks are going to be working on it, and that is all I have for this morning.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nate. Really appreciate it. We're now going to kick it over to Laura Gonzalez with Clean Virginia to talk to us a little bit more about energy efficiency. Laura.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I think Brittany is going to help me with the slides. Oh, those are not, that's the slides. Ah, yes, okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Laura Gonzalez with Clean Virginia, the Energy Policy Manager, and there is a very big group working in energy efficiency. It should be the core of our energy planning and our energy future. And in the energy world, the cheapest kilowatt hour is the kilowatt hour we do not produce. And I wanted to start with this graph here to answer really how much cheaper is to save a megawatt hour than to produce a megawatt hour. And in this graph shows how much it costs to produce electricity with different energy sources. For example, each megawatt hour a peaker gas plant produces could cost between $200 and $150 per megawatt hour, which is dramatically more expensive than energy efficiency that could be as cheap as $12 per megawatt hour. You can see it all the way to the left. You can go to the next slide. Yes, so in general, we all know that energy efficiency is a great deal for all. Cost-effective energy efficiency upgrades can save Virginians up to more than $700 a year on utility bills. In 2022, the energy efficiency industry sustained over 74,000 jobs in Virginia, which is more than what the fossil fuel industry provides in Virginia. And we know that incremental energy savings from current Dominion energy programs through 2038 could avoid the new natural gas peaker plant in Chesterfield. So energy efficiency creates jobs, saves money, and reduces pollution. You can go to the next slide. So maximizing all the potential of energy efficiency requires the cooperation of all our electric utilities. And for this reason, the Virginia Clean Economy Act established a policy used in more than 27 states called the Energy Efficiency Resources Standard, or EERS, for our two largest investor-owned utilities, Appalachian Power Company and Dominion Energy. Basically, the EERS sets energy savings targets for each utility that should be achieved every year. And the goal is to save a certain percentage of energy sales every year. And in your right, you can see the incremental forecasted energy savings that both APCO and Dominion are saying they're going to achieve. You can see that APCO has a very low incremental energy efficiency savings, around 0.63% in 2023, 0.57 in 2024. But this is very modest and not as ambitious as it should be. Other utilities that are very similar to APCO across the country are achieving up to 1.38% of incremental energy savings. And for Dominion, we have a very similar story. They are achieving very low incremental energy efficiency targets of around 0.60%, 0.60% in 2024 again, and peer utilities for Dominion Energy are achieving 3%. So if with very modest savings through 2038, we can avoid a whole natural gas peaker plant. Imagine what we could do with 5 times that. We could accelerate the energy efficiency goals, but we could accelerate our decarbonization goals, create more jobs, save more money, and in general, create a more healthy energy environment. So this is one of the most important policies we should achieve in Virginia, and we hope this is a very bipartisan initiative. It doesn't depend on politics. It produces savings for all, and it will help us reduce our emissions in general. And that's all I have for today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Laura, for that presentation. And our final panelist for our climate and clean energy panel is Ashish Kapoor with the Piedmont Environmental Council, and he's going to talk to us about Equitable Solar. Ashish.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Ashish Kapoor. I'm the Senior Energy and Climate Policy Analyst at PEC, and I will be talking about a slate of 6 bills that we have relating to equitable solar. So first is shared, inclusive utility investment. So this is essentially on-bill financing. So expanding access to energy projects. So this is everything from electrification to energy storage, solar projects, energy efficiency, and you're paying for the system through your utility bill. So this makes it easier to finance a large project. If you move, it makes it easier to slide it over to the new owner and gives that flexibility. So it really expands the pool of folks that can take advantage. Savings guarantees for all customers, that's part of the bill. 75-25 split. That basically means 75% of the savings that are on that bill will go towards paying the system, and then 25% will be pure savings for the customer. So this calls for $350 million of a Dominion investment in this program for the first 3 years, and then $150 million from APCO for the first 3 years. So a total of $500 million investment from the 2 major utilities, and then no cap after that. And then also working on a negotiated interest rate, certainly relevant in our current climate. So that should, hopefully facilitate more adoption of these energy projects. Next is 2 bills. This is shared solar. Community solar is not accessible right now in the APCO, so that's leaving 500,000 plus customers out there out of this space. And again, this is just folks that can't or don't get solar on their own rooftop, but want to get renewable energy from an offsite facility up to 5 megawatts can buy into this program. So 30% of the participants would be low income, and guaranteed net savings for every participant with 10% for low-income qualified customers. Dunsky report findings, just kind of high level. This was a report done by a consultancy group that even with a 80% reduction in the minimum bill, that utilities would still save almost $500 million over the next 25 years with an expanded shared solar program. So I think it's a great stat and shows the sort of savings element. And then there's also the equity element. Community solar, shared solar employs significantly more people from the local community than a lot of other options. So that equity element is also very important, with additional incentives here for rooftops, landfills, brownfields, and dual use. I think this is a great wrinkle that further incentivizes developers to build these shared solar projects on built or disturbed land. Cap raise. So this is sort of the most critical portion of this. Is right now the cap in Dominion is 150 megawatts for shared solar. This would raise it and concurrently with the APCO program to 10% of the utility's peak load. So a dramatic expansion of shared solar along with various consumer protections. Next, we have parking lot solar. So this funds parking lot solar through a levelized value for SRECs. SRECs are basically whether you have a residential system, whether you have a larger system, for every 1 megawatt hour of energy that's produced from that system, you get a renewable energy certificate, and that's traded on the market. And we do have the ability to do that. Whatever capacity your system is in, you can trade those on the PJM market. So this guarantees a 10-year value for parking lot solar projects, and that's really what developers look at when they're looking to penetrate a new market like Virginia. What is my rate of return guaranteed over the next 10 years? Makes it a lot easier for them to get financing for the program, and also guarantees that it will be worthwhile for them. So this really calls for a stakeholder process with various conservancy groups, energy trade associations, and so forth, to determine what that value would be in Virginia, to help close that sort of financial investment gap for parking lot solar. And then concurrently having a process where we have a mapping of sites that are available, and then extra layers and extra potential incentives for EV charging, the ability of these parking lot solar programs to reduce peak load demand at critical times, and so forth. And then last two real quick is solar leasing. So this explicitly allows solar leasing, your PPAs, so residential power purchase agreements where the developer buys the system, installs the system, maintains the system. It's a less capital intensive way to go solar. That's appealing for many people. So this would explicitly allow for that, and it's a 2023 House substitute bill. And last, we have a consumer protection bill informed by existing legislation and everything from North Carolina to Florida, and then states like Illinois that have pretty good consumer protections in place. So I will stop there, and thanks so much, Mary.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashish. So a huge thanks to our climate and clean energy panel. We have a ton of questions flying in, so I'm doing my best to keep track of them and make sure that we get to as many as we can in our allotted time here. I'm going to start, Nate, with you. There's a bunch of questions coming in on RGGI in particular. So I want to ask, to the extent that you're able, if you can touch on what is going on with the current suit that the governor or that Southern Environmental Law Center has with DEQ, the Department of Environmental Quality, on them pulling out of RGGI. And then the second thing is obviously RGGI up until this point has generated a significant amount of revenue, both for energy efficiency programs as well as for resiliency programs. So what, if anything, will happen to that revenue? Will there be, new pots of revenue that come in, do you think, or how do you think that that's going to be handled?
Yeah, first question, the lawsuit is ongoing. It just got transferred to Floyd County Circuit Court. So the timetable is up in the air. We're trying to get some preliminary issues heard as quickly as possible, including trying to get a stay to suspend the repeal so that we would continue participating in RGGI. Timetable is unknown at this point, but we're working to try to move that along as quickly as we can. And the second part is, our understanding is the money that has sort of already come in and been put into the, funding buckets for the various programs. Our understanding is that shouldn't be clawed back in some way. But we're also, we technically will participate in another Reggie auction next week. And we need to be sure that that new money is appropriated to these programs as well. And of course, if we are able to get back in Reggie, we'll have to deal with the new funding there as well. So it's really keeping whatever appropriations come in, keeping those moving out to these really great programs.
Thank you, Nate. I appreciate it. Laura, the next set of questions is for you. It sounds like from your presentation and as others know, that it doesn't even really seem like Dominion is hitting its current existing energy efficiency targets. So, to what extent do we need to put more teeth on the law, if at any, to make sure that they actually meet the existing targets in addition to continuing the targets down the road? And then the second part of the question is obviously you're talking about kind of what the utility as a whole can do, but are there any kind of residential or commercial things that folks should be advocating for potentially in the budget? So more weatherization or anything else that folks can, more tax breaks or anything, so residential consumers can do what they can do to have more energy efficiency of their homes or of their office buildings.
Yes. So the first question, yes, we definitely need to advocate for giving the State Corporation Commission more power to enforce these targets and increase the utility incentives for meeting and exceeding the targets. We need energy efficiency to be the cornerstone or the basis of every energy or every energy planning in the future. So yes, the answer is yes, we need more enforcement, more penalties, more rewards for exceeding the targets. And to your second question, so it is very important that we are informed about the programs that the utility offers. And another important another important venue to participate is in the stakeholder process of creating these energy efficiency programs of APCO and Dominion. So we can participate in those stakeholder process, kind of shaping these energy efficiency programs. We know that there is a lot of federal money coming into the state, and Virginia Energy is doing a great job at organizing that money. So we should be very kind of we should be at the expectation of how all this money is going to be available for consumers, and encourage everybody to get an energy efficiency audit of our homes and take advantage of the utility programs and advocating for more.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. Ashish, we have a couple of questions that have come in for you. So on solar leasing, are commercial and nonprofits available for PPAs? And then the second question is, are there any possibilities to address the high shared solar minimum bill that many folks are dealing with? And if you could just give quick background on those and answer those questions to the extent you know.
Sure. Sorry, the second question was what? To share the bill?
If there's legislation to address the high shared solar minimum bill.
Gotcha. Okay. So nonprofits would be eligible for the PPA program, and then currently there is commercial PPAs are capped at 500 megawatts for jurisdictional and non-jurisdictional. So seems to also be part of the process, is expanding that cap. And then on the shared solar leasing, the shared solar, there's guaranteed savings. So there's not, as of now, an adjustment in the minimum bill language, but there's guaranteed savings for all customers. That's part of that language. So one way or another, based on how the math shakes out, there will be savings for everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much. A huge thanks to our panelists, Nate, Laura, and Ashish. I'm sure we could talk for hours, but that's the only time we have for today, so we can get to everything. So thank you all so much for joining us and for answering our questions. There's a bunch of questions that have come in. Some of them I can actually answer. So, keep an eye on your text. I'll do the best that I can to answer ones that I have the answer for. And for others, we'll make sure that we get resources out. I have been asked a few times whether or not this presentation will be available for those who are participating. And yes, we are recording the presentation. And yes, it will be available to participants afterwards. So you do not have to take furious notes, but instead you can rewatch any of the sections that you wanted to hear more of. So thank you so much for that question. Our next panelist, we are going to do our first hot topic panel. So it is just one speaker, and then we'll allow for questions. Excited to invite Julie Bolthouse to talk to us about data centers. Some of you probably have heard nothing but information about data centers recently, and some of you may not have heard anything about data centers recently, but we do expect it to be a hot topic in this year's General Assembly session. So Julie, I'm excited for you to tell us a little bit more about data centers and what might be coming up this General Assembly session.
Thank you very much, Mary. So we have two briefing book papers that were in the common agenda. So I just want to recognize my fellow authors on those, Kyle Hart and Dan Holmes and Will Cleveland also helped to write those papers. So what is the big issue around data centers? And basically it's threatening to derail all the hard work that we've put into our conservation goals and our climate goals as a state. And it's going to cost Virginians billions. So this graph that you see on the slide is Dominion's load projections, 5% annual increase, which results in a doubling of the peak load within 14 years. That kind of energy growth or that kind of energy demand is unprecedented. So Virginia has the largest data center market in the world right now, and it's growing the fastest. Yet our regulatory oversight is far behind other large markets in the region. We don't require transparency around energy or water usage the same way as the EU energy efficiency standards just passed in September of this year do. We don't require that information upfront before localities approve these things like other countries do. We also don't mandate energy efficiency standards like places like Singapore and the EU standards will do into the future. And those are things that we can make a lot of progress on. We know, what we do know though about our data centers here is that they use a huge amount of electricity, up to 90 megawatts per building at this point. And it's increasing. And the reason it's increasing is because those servers and the chips within them are getting, they're using more, they're able to process more, and therefore they're using more energy and they're creating more heat in the process. So the cooling's taking more electricity, and the actual processing that they can fit into a single building is taking more energy. So 90 megawatts, that's the equivalent of about 22,000 households at peak demand, to give you context. We also know that much of that energy is actually still coming from fossil fuels. Even though there is heavy investment in renewables by the data center industry, it is far outpaced by the amount of electricity that they're using. So the plan put forward by Dominion will make it worse, though. And although it does include some solar and battery storage, it also includes delayed retirement of coal, new fossil fuel sources, and heavy reliance on purchasing out-of-state power, which also is fueled much by fossil fuels as well. The cost of this is also very frightening from an equity standpoint, especially the monthly bill of a Virginian residential customer is going to be doubling by 2035 if we move forward with these projections. So our recommendations in the common agenda that we put out were to have a study done by National Academy of Science or some other independent organization, have a state agency review of the data center applications, including a grid impact analysis potentially conducted by the SCC, regional review of these huge issues such as water supply, air quality, and other grid impacts, things like that, and then a shift of the cost of the infrastructure burden onto the industry rather than the ratepayers as a whole. And What have we been doing? What progress have we made? Well, we have this group now, the Virginia Data Center Reform Coalition. We've met several times, and we just had our big kickoff yesterday. And if you can hear, I'm slightly sick, probably from being around lots of people. But it was very successful. It was a wonderful event. Our outreach and advocacy has been very successful. We've been meeting with legislators. We've been getting the word out there. We've had numerous webinars held by our partners in Henrico and Fredericksburg and Spotsylvania, all over the place. We've been holding these town halls and webinars to inform people about what's going on. And as a result of meeting with those legislators and having those conversations and getting the word out, we have a number of bills. And I'm not going to go over every single one because there's too many. And we have several legislators carrying those bills. So just a couple I want to highlight is we have some on national park protection, siting assessment, water supply and water quality protection, tying state subsidies to energy efficiency standards, adjusting the rate structure to force the industry to carry more of that burden from the cost from the infrastructure that they're demanding, and then a comprehensive study of the cumulative impacts on our grid, on water resources, on ratepayers, on air quality, park and land resources, and climate goals. And there is also a JLARC study in the works as well, and we'll see that might wind up replacing that more comprehensive study, but there is bills out there for both. With that, I'll go ahead and pass it back over to Mary.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Julie. This is really, really helpful background. We just got one question. You talked a lot about the energy impacts, Julie. Can you quickly touch on the water impacts of data centers?
Yeah, it varies widely, but it can be extremely intensive, from hundreds of millions of gallons per day for swamp cooling or evaporative cooling data centers. But some of them use closed loop systems, which would actually use a whole lot less, would consume a whole lot less water. The problem is with the higher cooling demands of AI, we are seeing a lot of proposals, especially down in Louisa and Caroline County, where they are drawing from potable drinking water sources for cooling.
Awesome. That is super helpful. And are these data centers required? That this particular question was whether or not they're required to meet a LEED certification, which is a certification of, kind of the top standards of energy efficiency and water protection, et cetera. But I guess really the question is what standards are the buildings held to in terms of when they're built, both for energy, water, land, any of those things?
Really, it's just the building code, the statewide building code. I mean, it's basically your standard for any building. There is no energy efficiency standard. There is no LEED standard required for data centers unless a locality implements such. And I don't know of any locality in Virginia that has implemented anything like that. They're all really trying to be as accommodating as they can to this industry, because they're all trying to attract the revenue that they potentially get from the machine and tools tax and real estate from bringing these industries into their locality. But no one's thinking about the long-term the implications to our infrastructure region-wide or to our natural resources.
Yeah, it's helpful. The other question that is coming through is kind of both sides. So one, what is kind of the I guess response been from the data center companies, some of these bigger data centers as they're coming in? Are they receptive to some of the changes that have been asked for? Are they receptive to some of the legislative recommendations that have been coming out? What's your response been there? And I guess the other side of the question, which is similar but a little bit different, but what do you really see as the arguments that are working the best in terms of what's gaining the most traction in terms of people wanting to take action on this issue?
I would say the one item that every legislator really wants to take action on is that cost shift. They see the inequity and the problem of having this cost burden fall onto the ratepayers as a whole, especially considering that this industry gets a bulk rate discount. So they're actually paying less than we are already, per watt. So I think that's what's resonating the most. But what was the first part of your question? I already forgot.
That's okay. How kind of have receptive been the data center companies?
Okay.
Are they receptive to the changes that you're asking for?
So when you talk to the data center companies individually, they all have ESG standards, which is their environmental sustainability, or I forget what the ESG stands for now, governance, sustainability, and I think environmental, something like that. But the point is that they all have these standards and they all say that they're meeting them, but they won't provide any actual data to show that. They have a group that represents them called the Data Center Coalition, and they have put out a response to our kickoff that we had yesterday. And their response is basically, we provide jobs, we provide revenue, we engage with the community through blood drives and trash pickups. And that's their response. They have not really, they're evading the question of regulation and of their energy concerns. And that also played out in the IRP as well. They refused to take a position on if Dominion should be using fossil fuels. All they submitted to the SCC in their comments was that they supported planning that would continue to provide them with reliable power for their business growth needs.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Julie. I am sure that we will have you on plenty more panels to come to tell us more about data centers. Thank you for your good work. Right before we leave, you just said that a new website was, or a new coalition was launched. Is there a website that folks can check out for that new coalition and learn more about data centers?
That is a really good question. No, we don't have a website specifically for the coalition set up, but we do on PEC's webpage. You can find out a whole lot more about what we're doing and all the efforts that are going on. It's pecva.org/data centers. Awesome.
Thank you so much, Julie. Really appreciate it. All right, we are moving on to clean water and resilience. This is our next panel. We have 3 speakers on this panel, so they will all go through and then we'll have an opportunity to ask them questions. But just as before, if you have questions, don't hesitate to send them to me in advance. We're going to start off with Bay Funding and Wetlands, and Jay Ford from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation is our featured speaker. Jay.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
We can.
Great. Thanks so much for getting up on a Saturday morning to talk about all the amazing work that's going to happen in the next General Assembly. The Bay, we're kind of at a unique point here. We've been running towards some 2025 goals under the Bay Agreement, and the bad news is we're not going to get there. But that offers a lot of opportunities for us. It's a time for us to kind of take a big picture look at all of the Bay programs and say, what is working, where are we getting results, and where do we need to maybe shift or develop some new tools to help us reach these objectives. And so I'm going to touch on some of the major programs that we're going to be looking for funding on this year. Those programs that have been really successful, and then touch on an area where we hope a new approach will help us meet our targets. All right. So each year we have sort of our big bins, and those are wastewater, stormwater, and agriculture. And we've seen tremendous gains in the wastewater sector. So we'd like the General Assembly to continue meeting the needs assessment for that sector at $200 million. They are almost there. And so we're really, really proud of the gains that have been made in that sector. Stormwater and agriculture, we still have a lot of ground to cover. These are harder areas for us to achieve both sediment and nutrient reductions because of the dispersed nature of stormwater, and that agriculture is, all over the place, everywhere. So it's just a harder issue to tackle. But our agricultural best management practices has only been fully funded now for a few years, and our districts around the state have been doing a wonderful job getting this money on the ground. So we're hopeful that we're going to see full funding again in this upcoming General Assembly session, so the farmers around Virginia can continue doing the great work they're doing. Additionally, we're going to be looking for $2 million for everyone's favorite oily, smelly fish, and that is the menhaden. There was a bill last year that directed VIMS to study what a study would look like, and in classic GA parlance, they punted for a year. We now have what that study of a study is, and so we'd like the General Assembly to fund that, so we can start to answer the question about what sustainable population of menhaden in the Chesapeake Bay specifically would look like. Additionally, we're going to be looking for funding for freshwater mussels to the tune of $2.5 million. This would allow some positions at DWR to remain, where they're doing fantastic work in trying to get these filter feeders who are out cleaning our streams up in the inland parts of Virginia, up in our freshwater bodies, deployed. It would also help expand the hatchery, and so they can get more of these little bivalves around the state. Additionally, we are going to be looking for some funding in oyster shell recycling. This is the best substrate for restoration and oyster work in Virginia, and we want our businesses to put them back in the bay instead of in the landfills. And so we're looking for incentive funds to help encourage that work to continue. And then, while it's a little more outside of just clean water, I want to mention this environmental literacy fund, because this is a really exciting idea, and we have enthusiastic sponsors on both sides in the Senate and the House. And this fund would allow funding for school districts to develop their environmental literacy plans, as well as provide funding to educators to further their skill set in environmental education, because if groups like us take them out on the water, that's one day and it's wonderful and transformative, but the teachers are with them for hundreds of days. And so they can make a much bigger impact over time. And so we're really excited about this idea and hope the General Assembly will rally behind it. I had mentioned new ideas. This year, you're going to hear a lot from Waterworld about the concept of pay for outcomes. And this is a new tool in our toolbox to help drive innovation and drive down costs. The core idea would be that instead of paying for a modeled project, we would pay someone for a demonstrated reduction in nutrient and sediment. This could apply to the agriculture as well as the stormwater sector, but we are looking for ways to kind of accelerate progress in introducing business incentives, and the ability for someone to profit is always a good way to make sure you're driving innovation. And so we're really excited about this concept, and this will be a $20 million pilot that we're working on via budget language this session, with more to come. Another important area this session for clean water is going to be protecting and enhancing critical habitats. So there are going to be a lot of tree bills. I have 6 and counting. We always say it's the year of the tree. This year, it's really the year of the tree. There are going to be bills that deal with local choice, the ability for a locality to require greater tree canopy. There are going to be bills that look at the impacts and mitigation of VDOT. And there's also going to be a really exciting vehicle this year to develop Virginia's Forest Conservation Act, which would essentially be a comprehensive plan for how we are going to address tree canopy statewide. We are going in the wrong direction currently, and this would spell out a roadmap to get us towards growing our tree canopy in the coming years. And then the last thing I do want to mention is wetlands. We had an unfortunate Supreme Court decision in Sackett earlier this year. We will be playing defense against any bills to try and water down Virginia's robust water and wetlands protection laws. Additionally, setting Sackett aside, Virginia is projected to lose over 80% of our tidal wetlands and over 50% of our non-tidal wetlands by 2080 as a result of climate impacts. We currently don't have a roadmap for that, so we will be working with legislators on a bill to stand up Virginia's first wetlands work group. this group would similarly produce a comprehensive plan to figure out how we're going to continue to have these vital ecosystems in the coming years. I'm probably at time, so I'm gonna go there and pass it on to the next speaker.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jay, for that really helpful presentation. And also a little birdie just gave me an update that not only are you joining us on a Saturday morning, but you are also joining us on your birthday. So happy birthday, Jay, and thank you for joining us for that presentation. Our next speaker, is Renee Grebe, who is going to talk to us about low impact landscaping. Go ahead, Renee.
Thanks, Mary. Renee Grebe here from Nature Forward, talking about managed conservation landscaping. So we have a bill that we're proposing that would amend Article 3 of the Virginia Code chapters relating to common interest communities, which I'm just calling for shortcut HOAs, but it actually will apply to the Property Owners Association Act, Virginia Condominium Act, and Virginia Real Estate Cooperative Act. And the bill would be proposing to define and allow for managed conservation landscaping on private property in HOAs, and also define and allow for reasonable HOA restrictions in the landscaping. But I want to do a quick story about why this issue is important. A Loudoun County HOA took action against Mike and Sean Pugh to remove their 2-acre meadow on their 5-acre lot. The homeowners ultimately won the case with an agreement from the HOA that the current covenants did not give the HOA authority to force them to remove their meadow. And the HOA was forced to pay $65,000 of the $85,000 in legal expenses. And in the end, protecting their meadow cost the Pughs $20,000 and 5 years of aggravation. Had a law been in place like the one that we're proposing, the Pughs could have saved a lot of money and heartache. And we should note that many people won't fight their HOAs, and most won't fight that hard or have the funds to do so. So we've been really lucky that we're working with Melinda Soltis for the past several months. She's a Fairfax County resident, also facing similar backlash in her HOA. And she's been the impetus in Virginia for this bill. She's been a fantastic partner doing so much with us, research in other states about what other similar laws have been passed, collecting stories from across Virginia of other residents facing this challenge. And, you know, we've heard the retort of stories like Melinda's and the Pughs of, I would never live in an HOA. But if you've seen the bit by John Oliver, of all single new family homes sold in the US in 2021, 82% of them were in an HOA. That's up from 40% in 1990. So it's not always possible to avoid them and getting harder. In Virginia, as of 2022, there are over 8,800 HOAs in Virginia housing about 2 million people, and that's over 23% of the state's population. We don't have stats on how many acres that is, but that's still a lot. When we think about the scale that this bill would affect, it's significant. And it's important because this type of landscaping is a resilient strategy in the face of higher intensity and more frequent storms to capture and treat stormwater, to eliminate and reduce fertilizers and pesticides that are typically applied in HOA landscapes. And it can help address the biodiversity crisis by infusing native plants back into our landscapes. And those big picture reasons matter for some of the reasons Jay was just talking about. We have WIP goals, watershed implementation plan goals, for doing our part in Virginia to clean the bay. Reducing non-point source pollution from private property is an integral part of meeting our total maximum daily load goals. And one of the ways that was defined in the WIP was expanding the use of VCAP for conservation-oriented projects such as conservation landscaping. But if over 80% of new homes built in the US are in an HOA, then we need this kind of flexibility more than ever to ensure that residents can take advantage of grant programs like VCAP and to be able to make more sustainable landscaping choices if they so desire. So where we have a bill being drafted now by Delegate Krizek. We're grateful for him. We would love to get a Senate sponsor. If anyone knows Richard Stewart, he's been suggested to us as someone who might be interested in this kind of bill. We'd love to have your help connecting with him. We've also spoken with Senator-elect Pekarsky in Fairfax County. I'm really grateful for everyone who has helped us ideate and brainstorm, including VCN, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, and Virginia Native Plant Society, to name a few. We did outreach to the Community Associations Institute. While they weren't able to partner with us to draft the bill, we're definitely going to share the draft when we get it. And we did get advice on how to make this more palatable. We've also done things like document list of supporters and supporting organizations and organizations to be aware of going forward as well. So how you can help. I've never led state legislation before, so we would really love your help and support co-leading this bill with us. We've got a great base to start from. I think we've done a lot of research. And so if you have any capacity to help us with strategies going forward and outreach, that would be great. help us engage your members and supporters as this bill goes forward. And then we do have this survey that we would love to have you share out with all of your members and supporters. This is helping us collect stories across the states that as we do the state legislation, we'll have stories that aren't just reflective of Northern Virginia where we do our work. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Renee. Appreciate your presentation. And our third panelist for this panel is Grace Tucker from the Environmental Defense Fund, who's going to talk to us about resiliency. Grace.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. I'm Grace Tucker, as Mary said, with Environmental Defense Fund's Climate Resilient Coast and Watersheds team in Virginia. I also want to thank Morgan Butler from SCLC, Jay Ford from CBS, Mary Carson Stiff from Wetlands Watch, and my colleague Emily Steinhilber from EDF, who co-authored our resilience policy paper in this year's Common Agenda. So the Commonwealth defines resilience as the capability to anticipate, prepare for, respond to, and recover from hazards to minimize damage to social well-being, health, the economy, and the environment. Much of Virginia's efforts on resilience have been focused on flooding to date along our coast as well as further inland. However, resilience is a whole of government problem that needs collaborative solutions. So throughout this year, a large group of stakeholders convened by Virginia's Chief Resilience Officer, including several VCM partners, met to discuss how to improve agencies' coordination on resilience governance so that Virginia can more effectively prepare for current and future climate impacts. Our top recommendations from this process that we're working on getting legislation on in this upcoming General Assembly included making the Chief Resilience Officer a standalone position instead of a joint appointment for the Secretary of Natural and Historic Resources as it is currently. And we're also advocating that the CRO have an office with professional staff to support an interagency working group that can begin to conduct resilience planning in key agencies. And as you heard from Nate, Virginia's participation in RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, has deployed critical funding to localities across the Commonwealth to fund capacity building, studies and data collection, and project implementation for flood resilience through the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. This program has received over $325 million since 2021, and with another auction coming next week from RGGI, and then nearly $100 million has been awarded in the last 2 years, with more than half of that money going to low-income localities. DCR is currently reviewing applications for another $50 million that will be awarded at the end of this year. And if you'd like to see fact sheets for all of the awards made to date, or be able to bring them into a legislator meeting, they're all on the VCM's RGGI webpage. RGGI remains the most effective way to get the most funding to localities for flood resilience. But with the Youngkin administration's decision to withdraw from RGGI, we will need to secure an alternative source of long-term funding for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund if we want this program to be able to continue. Virginia also has a new program, the Resilient Virginia Revolving Fund, that received $100 million in the budget last year to provide localities with low-interest loans for building mitigation and voluntary home buyout programs and more. And there's $18.5 million available for localities to apply for right now. During this General Assembly, we're going to be advocating for this fund to prioritize low-income localities, just as the Community Flood Preparedness Fund does, and try to encourage more floodplain restoration activities that will be able to generate more ecosystem benefits while also moving people out of harm's way. But with great resources comes great responsibility, and so we're also advocating for increased transparency around these funding decisions. The Youngkin administration has committed to create a review committee and publish application materials and scores for both of these programs that we'd like to see put into law, in addition to the creation of a board to help provide more oversight of these funds. And as we know, climate change is increasing sea level rise and rainfall across the Commonwealth, so it's more important than ever that Virginians understand their flood risk. Unfortunately, the current system does not provide prospective homebuyers or renters with information on past flood damages and costs, requirements for flood insurance, and past insurance claims. So we're working to change that with new legislation for flood risk disclosure during this session. And here is my contact info.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Grace and Renee and Jay, for your presentations. I now do have some questions. Jay, let's start with you. I think lots of chatter in the text messages that I was getting about this pay for performance or pay for outcomes idea that you floated. So I think some of the questions were, is there an example out there of where this has worked, and has CBF done some background and research on that? And then also, just if you could clarify, does that mean that Right now, a farmer, can receive money to put up, things to keep their, fences or other things to keep their cows out of streams. Would they not receive that until they met these outcomes? And what would be the cost barriers there? So if you could just talk a little bit more again about the pay for outcomes piece. There was a lot of interest there.
Sure. So the way our program currently works, our VAX program, you are paid for the practice that's put on the ground. And so if it's cover crop or stream fencing, as you mentioned, they have various repayment structures. Stream fencing is 100%, cover crop is a certain percentage based on what you're planting. But the model of pay for outcomes, it would invert that system. You would be paid on the backside, but you would be allowed to profit. Right now, our VAX program has strict language prohibiting agricultural producer or anyone that's installing a VMP for this kind of reduction from making money. You can just get the practice paid for. And it does build in some sort of disincentives for some of the more effective practices, because those practices that take a lot of your land out of production, you don't make money off of that, you just get the practice, there's really not a huge incentive for the landowner to explore those options, even if they have really good conservation value. So one of the thoughts here is that we can bring people, generate interest in some of these practices that previously would not be worth it for them financially. The other thought is that the pay for performance model really is geared towards the business sector. So people that can put capital on the table in order to make a profit on the back end. So, we really envision that there'll be for-profit businesses that are looking for key locations where they can do major wetlands restoration or major stream buffering and planting. And then they can really afford to float that and then make money on the back end. So this is not really, this is a tool to augment what's happening in the VAX program. That program we still think needs to be fully funded, and that works for a lot of farmers. But for some innovative approaches and allowing the for-profit sector to come in and help Virginia accelerate this process, we think this is another tool in the toolbox to help meet some of those objectives.
Awesome, thanks. And Jay, we did not ask you here to talk about PFAS, but somebody has asked if there is a quick update on what's going on PFAS, and I'm not sure who else to ask, so I'm going to ask you, what's going on with PFAS and what is PFAS?
So there will be PFAS legislation this year. I know that we will have.
What is PFAS, Jay?
PFAS are what we colloquially call some forever chemicals that are found in just about everything from the lining of pans to clothing to fire suppressant. And fortunately, the impacts of them and the fact that they are persistent in water and in the environment is now widely known. And so the EPA is moving towards setting a standard that is going to require a lot of steps here in Virginia. So there's some conversations around what that's going to look like for our wastewater sector, how we can eliminate the prevalence of PFAS at the source so we don't have to deal with this further on along the natural resource chain, and then some basic awareness questions as well, consumer protection. So there's going to be a couple of different flavors, but I think we're going to see Senator McPike as a leader on this year, and as well as our good friends at Potomac River Keeper. But I expect all of us to be involved in that fight.
Awesome. Thank you. Renee, this next question is for you. How can the HOA managed conservation landscaping provisions be expanded to include municipalities, or can they be expanded to include municipalities?
That's a great question. We've been asked that question, but it's under a different part of the code. So this bill would not address it, but it's certainly something we should keep in our minds for the future.
Awesome. And just a heads up, Renee, lots of people asking for your contact information. So I will share that with people, but lots of interest for you. Grace, you keep talking about the RGGI auction. What's the RGGI auction?
So the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which Nate mentioned briefly before, is a multi-state cap and invest program that Virginia has participated in since 2021, thanks to the Virginia Clean Economy Act. RGGI creates auctions every quarter where utilities pay for the emissions that they're going to emit, and then that revenue comes back to states. And in Virginia, we've divided that money so that 50% of proceeds go to low-income energy efficiency and weatherization programs that are run by the Department of Housing and Community Development, and then 45% of proceeds go to the Department of Conservation and Recreation for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. And I realize that math doesn't add up to 105%, goes to some administrative fees.
Thank you, Grace. Jay, Renee, Grace, thank you all so much for joining our panel this morning on clean water and resilience. There's, of course, a lot that's going to be happening on these topics and even more questions that came in that we didn't get to. I will do my best to answer those that I can and pass on contact information for those that I can't. But thank you all so much for all the work that you're doing. Up next, we have Maribel Castañeda. I am really excited about this hot topic panel. So it will just be Maribel, and then we'll have a chance to ask her questions to talk about dedicated funding for Virginia's outdoors. Maribel.
Thanks, Mary. Thank you all so much for having me. My name is Maribel Castañeda, coordinator for Our Virginia Outdoors. We are a bipartisan coalition promoting Virginia's outdoors for all. We're a fairly new coalition of about 60 organizations, including land trusts, trail advocates, Virginia Indian tribes, user groups, and many more. This year, we've been focusing on highlighting the beauty of Virginia's outdoors, sharing the importance about our outdoors, the impact it has in Virginia, and having more coordinated efforts among our organizations. This past year, we also co-wrote a paper in our common agenda on investing in conservation and outdoor recreation. I want to recognize our authors and members of the coalition who did a great job. Elliot Caldwell with East Coast Greenway Alliance, Justin Doyle with the James River Association, and Kyle Lawrence with the Shenandoah Valley Bicycle Coalition. So Our Virginia Outdoors was formed to address the need for dedicated funding in Virginia for trails, parks, land conservation, and grant programs that support these efforts. Because we don't have a dedicated funding source to support Virginia's outdoor spaces, we end up having underfunded programs that are not able to keep up with the demand for trails, parks, and public lands. Staff and infrastructure are also underfunded and strained. And this has resulted in Virginia ranking near the bottom compared to other states spending on natural resources. It's very disconnected from what our communities want. According to the 2018 Virginia Outdoors Plan that will be updated very soon, 70% of Virginians support public spending to prevent the loss of natural areas and open spaces. So there's plenty of reasons why it's time to invest in Virginia's outdoor spaces. We created this handout to message the benefits. Outdoor recreation creates jobs. The U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis just published new data from 2022 that outdoor recreation contributes $11.3 billion to the Commonwealth and supports nearly 125,000 jobs. Our outdoor spaces improve lives. It is important more than ever for children and families to access the outdoors for their physical and mental health. Investments in conservation saves lives, and we shared that 70% of Virginians support public spending to prevent the loss of natural areas and open spaces. Funding the outdoors also supports bipartisanship. Recent polling showed that 8 in 10 Virginians support a proposal to dedicate $300 million to conservation programs. And lastly, funding conservation. For every dollar invested in land conservation, $4 in natural goods and services is returned to the Commonwealth. So we are an energized group, and we want to start the fight this year for dedicated funding. We are calling this the Virginia's Great Outdoors Act. This past few weeks have been very busy finding patrons in the House and Senate who share our vision for funding the outdoors. We're very much still working on this, but we see this as a bipartisan package to help fund the following: $50 million for grant programs that you see there, $150 million for state parks, public lands, and trails for a total of $200 million. These figures were taken from this year's Our Common Agenda and what folks were asking for. One piece that we're also working through is the funding source. We have a list of funding sources and are working with legislators on what they believe is most viable. Once we have the bill language, I'm happy to share out. We are working with members of our coalition to ensure that all groups are represented. Here's our contact information if you have any questions. Our coalition meets every second Tuesday of the month for a monthly huddle. So if you're interested in learning more, please reach out and join us in this path toward funding our outdoors. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Maribel. This is a really exciting new initiative, and thank you in particular for your leadership on working on all of this. One question for you as a follow-up, would the Great Outdoors Act money be available to municipalities, or how are you thinking about how the money would be allocated?
Yes, so we've got a couple of localities that are currently members of our coalition. And so we've been hearing the voice of localities, municipalities, and we would anticipate that those funds would be made available for certain grant programs, especially that some localities can't meet that matching fund. So we want to be able to support them as much as we can because they're the ones that are really delivering these programs and initiatives close by.
Awesome. Yeah, and as a follow-up, you would kind of use this figure for every $1 put into outdoor spaces, $4 comes back to us. So I think this question is asked a little bit in light, but I think it's true. How do we get our hands on that $4 that's coming back? What's, can we tap into that in order to get more money back into conservation?
Yeah, absolutely. That figure came from a TPL study on the return on investment in outdoor recreation and conservation. So we're really seeing a big emphasis in the impact that outdoor recreation especially has in these local economies. Just the other day, there was on the federal side, they had a hearing on the Explore Act, which will also expand some funding into outdoor recreation. And they were also talking about this return on investment. And you had the folks from the U.S. Park Service, Forest Service say how little it takes, but the impact that it has to invest in conservation and parks, trails, the outdoors is huge.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, Maribel, thanks again for joining us. Thanks for all your great leadership here, and would definitely encourage people to get involved. We just had something come in. What is a TPL study? That's the Trust for Public Land study. And Maribel, is that available on the Our Virginia Outdoors website if somebody wanted to look at it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll drop it in the chat. But if you go to ourvirginiaoutdoors.com, you've got to spell out Virginia and /Y, you can land on all of the sources that we've posted.
Awesome. And so for those of you who are watching from a watch party and might not have the chat, it's Our Virginia Outdoors with Virginia spelled out.org. And you can get all of that information, including this really great study from Trust for Public Land. Thanks again, Maribel, for joining us. All right, we are on our last panel. So thanks y'all for sticking with us. And I'm excited for this one. It is about transportation. We have three fantastic speakers, and we're going to kick off with Blair St. Ledger Olson, who is with Climate Cabinet, to talk about transportation electrification. Blair.
Awesome. Thanks, Mary. Can someone just give me like a thumbs up or a heads up that you can actually see the right slides?
We've got you on your slides and we can hear you.
Amazing. All right. 3 years into this and we are figuring it out, how virtual works. So hi folks, like Mary said, my name is Blair St. Ledger Olson. I'm joining you from Climate Cabinet. Sometimes that means I represent Climate Cabinet Action or our PAC, or today, Education. And you guys are getting a sneak peek at our brand new logo. So don't tell my comms team that I did that, but I figured why not? So we're going to talk about transportation electrification and how we can accelerate it. And if you're thinking, hey, haven't we talked about this before? The answer is yes. This is an ongoing priority for all of the work that the environmental and clean energy community has been doing over the past couple of years. And we want to keep fighting the good fight. So let's talk about why we're talking about transportation electrification in particular right now. And there's some really awesome panelists after me who are going to talk even more high level and holistically about transportation. I'm really going to focus in on electrifying things. But here's why, essentially, transportation is such a big priority. It's over 50% of Virginia's carbon dioxide emissions. It's more than energy, it's more than buildings, it's more than industry, it's more than ag. That's huge. That is literally over half. And this pollution is disproportionately affecting low income communities and communities of color, and who are breathing in 66% more vehicular air pollution than white residents on average. And that stat isn't just specific to Virginia, it is the Mid-Atlantic overall. So this is really a important issue to be tackling throughout the country. But we're focused on Virginia right now, so let's dive in. If you've heard advanced clean car standards before, it's because we've been talking about it since we passed it in 2021. And it is one of the most, if not to be honest, the most important tool we have to reduce tailpipe pollution. And how these standards work that we did codify in 2021, they increase the percentage of electric vehicles, or EVs, that have to be delivered to Virginia's car dealerships each year, starting with what's called model year 2025, which starts to hit car lots in about fall of 2024. And this is the crucial program from a transportation electrification perspective to protect in the 2024 legislative session. And the first two bills of the Republican caucus this year was HB3 and SB3. 1 and 2, they got beat out by the Democratic caucus. But these two bills are both introduced already to repeal the clean car standards. We had about a dozen repeal bills in 2023, and I think 8 in 2022, if memory serves. So we definitely know that we are still playing defense and making sure that we can protect this program. But there's also other things that go hand in hand with the advanced clean car standards to help make it even more effective. And one of those things is talking about our charging infrastructure. So if we want to get to a place where we have an electric transportation system, that means we also need the charging infrastructure to go along with it. So thanks to SELC, shout out to Trip, who's in the other room and whose awesome piece of paper I used on some of these slides. As of September of 2023, there are approximately 1,190 public charging stations in Virginia. And the existing programs that have helped get us there have included the Volkswagen Dieselgate funding, which has been implemented by DEQ, focused on transportation corridors in Virginia. And then the federal NEVI program is getting started, which comes from the IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, that was passed by the federal government. There are definitely other small programs. There's a smaller private market in Virginia to get EV chargers in the ground, so to speak. But these are really the two big ones. And what they really focus on is these highway corridors and, higher income city centers. And what gets left out of that is charging infrastructure in rural and lower income communities. And so there are pieces of legislation that are being run this coming session to both tackle rural and LMI localities and areas, as well as helping to start conversations about getting electric vehicle readiness, so EV charging readiness and accessibility into new building construction. And I wanted to make a nod, I'm not currently aware of any bills on this subject, but the workforce development component. We talk a lot about a just transition when we talk about the energy transition and energy space, but it's also really important in the transportation electrification space as well, making sure that there are workforce development programs in rural and Southwest Virginia, if we're going to incentivize placing chargers there, that there are electrician training programs and installation programs and the like to help make sure that that charging infrastructure stays up to date and maintained properly so that we can all use it. And last but not least, as we talk about trying to get more people into electric cars if they are completely reliant on a single occupancy vehicle, is how we help them buy these cars. So we've been talking a lot about this program too since 2021, which is when our EV rebate was actually originally codified, or the program was structured when we were passing the clean car standards in 2021. But given we were in a pandemic situation and we had a lot of fiscal uncertainty, we failed to get it funded. However, The EV rebate, as currently structured in Virginia, that's on the books, it's in the code, is the most equitably designed EV financial incentive in the country. It reduces the point of sale cost of an electric vehicle, which means instead of having to wait for your tax credit several months later from the federal government, it drops that purchase price right then and there. And that is hugely important when we talk about actually truly reducing the upfront cost of these higher priced vehicles. It applies to new and used. It has an additional incentive for Virginians who are at the 300% of the federal poverty line. It has price caps for those new and used, and it has sunset provisions. It is the only program in the country that does all of those things combined. There are other programs that are available to use, for instance, but not point of sale. So this is really, Virginia looked at every program and said, we are going to do this right. And so our next step is that we really need to fund it, because polls after polls show that the higher upfront cost of electric vehicles, even though they are so much cheaper to own over the life cycle of the car, because they don't have all that maintenance, they do have a higher upfront price point. And that's the number one reason voters still aren't considering going electric. And with restructuring of the federal tax credit with the Inflation Reduction Act that passed in 2022, there's a gap now. The IRA is phenomenal. I'm so happy the EV tax credit was renewed in it. However, the way it got restructured is it is starting in this coming year only going to apply for the most part to vehicles with domestic manufacturing. And right now, that's simply not where the industry is. It's going to take several years to bring that manufacturing over to the US in order for that tax credit to really start to be effective again, which means we have a gap, and Virginia can lead on that gap. And to support that, we do have a budget amendment strategy in place for the 2024 session. And you can find all of these policy solutions and more in our Accelerating Transportation Electrification, a Common Agenda briefing book, which was written really not by me, to be totally honest. I just happen to know about all these issues, but Lena Lewis and Chris Lane and Vic Higgins with TNC, LCV, and CCAN respectively really led the charge on writing this year's briefing book. So I really wanted to give them a awesome shout out and thanks for them picking up this torch. That
Awesome.
being said, I can be reached here if you have any questions. So
Thanks so much,
handing it back to
Blair.
Mary.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate that, and really appreciate the overview on electrification. Now we're going to pass it over to someone who probably needs no introduction on this call, but Tripp Pollard from the Southern Environmental Law Center, who's going to give us a little bit more of a broad overview on transportation funding writ large. Tripp, go ahead, take it away.
Thanks, Mary. Good morning, everyone. So the key starting point talking about transportation funding and transportation more broadly is the fact that transportation is a primary contributor to almost every significant environmental problem we face in Virginia.
Hey, Tripp, can I just interrupt you for just 1 second? I think you're in a room with somebody else who is also listening. And so the people around Tripp, can you just make sure that your computers are muted?
So he's not, and I have headphones in, so I don't actually know why that echo is occurring.
Okay, that's all right, Tripp, we can hear you, so just keep going.
Okay. So as Blair mentioned, it's the number one source of climate pollution. Transportation is responsible for about half of our carbon pollution in Virginia, as well as a number of other air pollutants and pollutants that affect today, our health, a wide range of problems. Yet most of the money we spend on transportation in Virginia goes to roads. This asphalt-centered approach continues to dig the hole deeper on the environmental impacts of transportation, increasing emissions, destroying carbon sinks, spurring sprawl. Bottom line is we've got to shift to more cleaner and equitable forms of transportation. So in the upcoming session, I think there's a couple areas of main focus, and unlike a number of the other presentations, this is all about the money. So the budget amendments, and we don't have bill numbers. The budget amendments haven't been introduced yet. The governor's budget isn't out until December 20th. So mostly, though, we know a number of things that we'll be prioritizing this session, and a lot of that is going to be playing mainly defense. Less concern on some of these issues with the composition of the incoming General Assembly, but there are a number of challenges Fundamentally, we want to be sure to protect the cleaner sources of transportation that we did get with some progress that was made in Virginia in 2020 with a new transportation omnibus bill that changed the funding formulas. And so we want to be sure to protect both the mass transit fund and the rail fund. So that's our kind of baseline starting point. But there are new challenges, such as the approaching fiscal cliff for the metro system in DC and Northern Virginia. Estimates vary, but it looks like we're looking at a gap of about $750 million for FY25, and that's projected to continue and possibly even widen after that. It could use a larger cash infusion, but for the next session, we're likely to try to pursue, people seem to be coalescing around some more modest steps that would impact a cap the General Assembly placed on the amount of money that the Armada can use for operating expenses. And then a smaller but useful step that is going to be introduced this session is to stop taking money from the transit fund to fund what's called the short line rail fund, and that mainly is for freight, shorter distance freights that takes trucks off the road. So it used to be funded from the highway fund. Apparently it was largely an error to switch it to the transit fund in the 2020 omnibus, and so we want to switch it back so that we'll put more money effectively back into transit. In addition to also advance cleaner, more equitable alternatives, there's going to be a proposal to address and streamline the process for bus stop approvals. The Transportation Omnibus created what's called the Transit Ridership Incentive Program, or the TRIP program, and it's focused originally mainly on supporting regional transit routes, and also it supported a number of reduced and zero fare programs. It was extended last year. A number of groups in our coalition worked on this to also allow it to be used to fund improvements for accessibility and safety of bus stops. But efforts to use this money have kind of run into some bureaucratic snags, primarily with the Department of General Services. So we're looking at provisions that will speed that back up. The other piece in terms of supporting cleaner alternatives is to support the Transforming Rail in Virginia initiative. This was developed under the Northam administration, and so far the Young administration has kept us on track. On the screen here is a report that we released with Virginians for High-Speed Rail, and it was co-sponsored by 3 business groups. We released it just a couple of weeks ago to try to educate this new wave of legislators about how we got to where we are on passenger rail, which in Virginia is experiencing a record year of ridership this year. And the Transforming Rail initiative is one of the most ambitious state rail programs in the country, and we need to protect the funding and keep it moving forward. In addition to some of these positive efforts and promoting cleaner transportation, we have to block destructive projects. Governor Youngkin pushed hard last session to create a select fund that would give him almost unparalleled authority to distribute hundreds of millions of dollars for economic development purposes. And we were able to put some important guardrails on it and limit the amount of money it got. We're likely to see another run at that this session. We also need to be defending against earmarks in the budget, which we tend to see almost every session for some destructive highways. In past years, we've seen things like I-73, the Bi-County Parkway, and others. And then finally, we'll need to oppose harmful changes to smart scale. Our funding prioritization process has been very effective in helping to shift money just from roads. The administration, I know this focus here is on the session, but the administration has some proposed changes. The Commonwealth Transportation Board is going to actually vote on next week. If adopted as proposed, they will significantly reduce funding for transit and bike-ped projects. We've been pushing back on that, and we will hopefully not see any further attempts to undermine smart scale in the coming session. So likely to be another busy session on transportation funding. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Trip, and the glories of running a live presentation in the technical technology world is that sometimes there's a little bit of a glip, but we will have all of this presented afterwards as well, and we will make sure to have put in transcripts underneath trips so folks can hear all of that if you missed any of it. So thanks for folks. Our final presentation on transportation is biking and walking by Brantley from Bike Walk RVA. So Brantley, welcome and go ahead.
Thanks and good morning. I'm happy to be here this morning, and I will not be super long and keep you from your next engagement. I'm excited to be a part of VCN's preview, so I hope you're having fun where you are. I'm excited to talk about biking and walking. We've talked a lot about how transportation is a significant contributor to greenhouse gases, and I'm sort of representing two papers here, a great team that worked on a pedestrian safety paper and an access to bicycling paper. So thanks to my partners for helping write these papers. It's been said before, maybe even higher numbers than I've got here, but DEQ reports this year that literally double the greenhouse contributions from our power sector come from our transportation sector. So it's just a great opportunity for us to focus on. If you build it, they will come. Bike lanes are super effective at increasing safety, and they also are very applicable for most of the trips that we take. So I think we have a lot of low-hanging fruit by building protected bike lanes and traffic calming and pedestrian safety. I'm going to run through some quick numbers. The quick synthesis of this is our traffic safety numbers are really going in the wrong direction. Last year, so the last full year to date processed by DMV and VDOT showed some marked increases in overall traffic fatalities in Virginia. The 3-year trend is a 22% increase in Virginia in all crashes, all crash types in Virginia, and a little over 4% over the last year, 21 to 22. If you look at pedestrian only, statewide, we saw a nearly 37% increase in pedestrian fatalities. I haven't seen this high of a percentage across the country, and when I talk to people doing this work in other states, this number really stands out. Our bicyclist crashes or fatalities have actually declined. I will say that we're working in the laws of small numbers here, which is a great problem to have. We don't want a lot of these statistically significant fatalities. At the same time, it's important to note that one of our signature policies that we enacted in 2021 coincides with this sort of short trend of lowering fatalities. This is something that might not be very apparent to folks, but the most vulnerable in Virginia are people over 50 years old. And the way I like to say this isn't their first time around the block. A lot of times when we talk about bike and pedestrian safety, we say, oh, that person was wearing black and they crossed mid-block and they didn't know what they were doing. If you've lived to be in your 50s, this isn't your first time having to cross the street. And I think that it really humanizes the issue that this really affects all of us, and especially our most vulnerable. But you can see we've got over 20% increase in people over 50 overall, and people walking, it's a 42% increase. People being killed who are over 50 years old, 21 to 22. These numbers are really big, and you can see that 402 here for overall fatalities, nowhere near as big the previous 3 years. Same deal with pedestrians. Simply put, there are a lot of different versions of this, and NHTSA, the National Highway Traffic Safety Association, and others have submitted similar graphics. Speed is the #1 factor determining whether a crash will be fatal or not. And so if you want to improve crash survivability, lower speeds, especially where you can imagine people will be walking. And unfortunately, this trend seems to continue to ring true that our most vulnerable are people of color. Black and brown Americans can have anywhere from a 2 to 4 times increase in terms of being killed biking or walking. So what are we trying to do about it? We have essentially 5 bills pre-filed this year. Some of them we've talked about year after year, and we've been making progress between sessions. The safety stop allows bicyclists to yield at stop signs. The second bill would allow bicyclists to cross when the walk signal changes. This is primarily related to areas where you see the walk signal change before a green light. And those are called LPIs, leading pedestrian intervals. They're very effective for pedestrian safety, and we think bicyclists should be able to have them as well. Photo speed enforcement was something that was enabled in 2020. It's very restricted where it's currently allowed, work zones and school zones only during work zone and school zone hours. But where used elsewhere, and now that we have some live programs in Virginia, they're very effective at reducing speed, which is, again, the prime way that we can improve safety and, of course, increase access, limiting the danger of our traffic environment for people who are vulnerable. Biking and walking is the best way to get them encouraged to incorporate it into their transportation regime. New and exciting, and sort of I imagine this will be a long-term effort, but providing a rebate for e-bikes is pre-filed this year. We certainly are working with the EV team, but e-bikes are extremely effective car replacers. They fill all the gaps that regular bikes may have, which is carrying stuff or going larger distances, or being accessible to people of different abilities, and even being able to carry passengers and kids. So being able to invest in Virginians riding e-bikes can really change the transportation game. And then the last one is really a bit of a catch-all. It's in 2021, we had great success with the Bicyclist Safety Act, and we may bundle some of these issues into an omnibus in order to better communicate and kind of drive advocacy around one common bill instead of lots of disparate bills that are not always easy to talk about on the floor. Some of the reasons why we like these bills: there's great data to suggest that allowing bicyclists to yield at stop signs as appropriate actually significantly reduces crashes. Leading pedestrian intervals significantly reduce crashes for pedestrians because they get out ahead of cars. Photo speed enforcement is maybe the single most effective speed enforcement tool that we have, and it takes the officer out of the equation, so it also has a lot of equitable benefits. E-bikes are actually outselling EVs significantly around the country, one, because they're slightly less expensive, or maybe a lot less expensive, but they also can do many more things. And I'm not to say I'm anti-EV, but it takes a car off the road, which the car is the thing that makes it dangerous. And again, we had some success with the Bike Safety Omnibus in 2021. I think that's all I've got, and happy to take some questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Brantley. We are running up on time, so I'm going to ask presenters, I'm going to ask a couple of rapid fire questions to make sure you still get the questions, but please keep your answers tight. All right, Blair, this first one is for you. We obviously just got a presentation earlier about the huge load growth on our grid, particularly as related to data centers, and the fact that Dominion is not actually hitting their energy efficiency target. So what impact, if any, will it have with EVs being on our electric grid?
Yeah, sure. So a big part of our climate priorities, not just for Virginia, but everywhere, is the electrification of everything, whether or not that's cars or buses or buildings. So in theory, yes, there is an impact on the grid in the sense of we will need electricity instead of piped natural gas or pumped into our cars gasoline. However, it actually, when you start having an electrification of everything strategy, that actually works as a grid stabilization. In Dominion's 2023 RFP, which is where the big data center numbers are coming from, data centers were this much and EVs were like this much. So it's really a itty bitty part of the puzzle, but it is a piece of the puzzle that actually has benefits as well for grid stabilization. And if you're interested, you can always contact me to talk more about that.
Awesome. Love to wonk out on the grid. Trip, these are your two rapid fire questions. One, there has been moves to electrify the rail in Virginia. So what's the update on that? And two, from our folks down in Roanoke, what's the update on getting Amtrak to Blacksburg and out even further?
So the electrification, it's going to be incredibly expensive to truly electrify the corridors in Virginia like they are in the Northeast, but we're going to get partly there by the purchase of dual fuel locomotives, which are coming to Virginia very shortly. They can switch from running on electric in the Northeast. When they change in DC, for anyone who's been on the train, you have to switch the engines. This will eliminate that and make a much smoother, much faster transfer. So that is the shorter term fix full electrification is still the long-term where we're headed, but it's going to take longer. It's going to cost a lot more. Dual fuel will help a lot, and then we're going to concentrate the rest of the money more on increasing the speed and capacity of the system. Then I think electrification will follow. In terms of extension, that is remaining and in the plans. It's, I believe, fully funded now, but there's a lot of discussion about where exactly the stop should be, the next one, as we extend further beyond Roanoke down towards Bedford. So that's the current status of that.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Trip. And Brantley, VDOT will just not put protected bike lanes in Northern Virginia. How do we get VDOT to put protected bike lanes in Northern Virginia?
They are building bike lanes now. I think they actually just opened a cycle track in, I want to say, Vienna, a two-way protected bike lane that uses new Zikla barriers, and also it builds in a transit platform for where there's a bus stop right next to it. So I think it's not accurate to say they're not building them, but to build more, certainly a decision with the Northern Virginia district office, and reach out to your locality.
Awesome. Well, that is a perfect way to set up that the whole reason that we put this event together every year is to encourage you, all of you individuals who are advocates in your own right, whether you sit on a board of a local organization, you are a regular volunteer, whether this is the first event you've shown up to, or this is on your calendar and you've been to all 25 to 30 that we've ever had, is to encourage you to get a sneak peek of what's about to happen during the General Assembly session, and give you the tools that you need to reach out to your state legislator. We have a lot, just remember what Chris said before, a lot of new local legislators. We have a lot new delegates, a lot new senators, and you probably know more than they do. So as a reminder, between now and January, you should send an email, make a phone call, go to a coffee or happy hour with your legislator that they host, or a town hall, set up a meeting, and express to them that this is important to you, and focus on education, education, education. We don't have to get super in the weeds, just make sure they know what's happening right now. You can do that by picking up a copy of our comment agenda. This is what all of the information was coming out of today. This is a full briefing book of all of the biggest environmental challenges that Virginia faces and smart policy solutions to address them. It also has the contact information for the key advocates that are working on this information. So every paper has the contact information of the leading organization and advocate, so that you can follow up, ask more questions, and be an advocate in your own community. I want to thank you all so much for being here. If you don't, one last thing, this is also on our website. So vcnva.org, you can download your own copy as well. So if you don't have the physical copy, and I think you can also order them online as well. Thank you so much for being here. For those of you who are at a local watch party, now's an opportunity to talk to your neighbors and talk a little bit more about how you can make a big impact in your region. For those of you who are at home, have a great rest of your day. And please save the date because we will be having our lobby day. It is the 31st of January. It'll be tied up with a water lobby day, which is also happening the 30th. So we hope to see you there. But between now and then, have an awesome rest of your December, and we will see you soon. Thanks for being an advocate. Thanks for your time today. We'll talk to y'all soon.